Hey guys, Christian and Vitali here. We're in the Garhwal Himalaya at Basecamp at 14,500 feet, and the weather's not good enough to go climb back there, and so instead we're doing a video on our expedition layering systems because it can be really complicated and there's a lot of information to sift through, and so we thought it'd be useful to just tell you guys about what we brought on this expedition while we're here and run through it all.
Yeah, even though I've done a video on all the base layers I like, in this video in particular, we will run through all the upper layers that we brought on the expedition and how we use them according to the particular weather window that we're planning to climb in. And one of the disclaimers I want to make is that some of this gear was received for free over the last couple years by Christian and I. For example, some of these Patagonia jackets were received from Patagonia for a photography assignment, but we are not trying to promote them in any way. If they weren't quality products, we would have already replaced them, but I just want to get that out of the way. So that no one thinks that we are, trying to promote the actual brands or products. We are just trying to share information. But with this introduction, to start, how about Christian can introduce the base layers and the upper layers that he will use and how he likes to use them. And I will ask him a few questions as he talks about his preferred system.
First thing is there's a lot of sun when you're out here and there's glaciers and snow everywhere, so it's good to have lots of sun protection. Always good to have like a little running hat. I like this little foldable visor from Amazon. It costs about $10. And a good pair of glacier sunglasses that go to like 95% darkness, maybe with some side shields. And if you can find some that come with some sort of nose cone, that can be useful, or you can also just buy a cheap nose cone separate to put on some other glasses. But really important because your sun or your nose will get roasted on the glacier. Also good to pair that with a buff. So I usually wear a hat, sunglasses with a nose cone, buff, and then sunscreen stick to keep covered up and not get burned. My favorite sort of base layer system is to have a really light sun hoodie. I really like this. It's pretty beat up now, but it's a Patagonia Airshed Pro pullover. It's like really packable, really thin if you're not wearing it. Doesn't really weigh anything. So that's usually my base layer is a sun hoodie.
Their capillary and cool base layer is also really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, moral of the story, something that's very, very thin that provides sun protection, whatever is in stock and available. This is just what I have. On top of that, I will usually go to a grid style fleece, like a Patagonia R1. This is like a mountain equipment equivalent. It's basically the same thing with a hood, a 3/4 zip. And then on top of that, I like a synthetic vest. Works really well for me just because I run a little bit hot. And so this makes it to where I'm not too hot all the time. It's easy to take on and off. And that's kind of my like basic system before I get into like any like regular style jacket.
Before you go farther into it, how do you layer on the approach when it's cold? Let's say the approach that we did during the night when it was probably -10 or something.
Yeah.
How did you layer for that?
Okay, so Vitaly asked a good question about how layering on the approach. And when you start at midnight and it's super cold and you might be hiking until like after sunrise when it's super hot, you kind of want to layer a little versatile so that you can shed layers and be ready for the sun when it comes out. So same thing, I would still start with the sun hoodie and probably the fleece and the vest like normal. And then on top of that, because I run hot, I might just throw a shell on top of it. Or if it's pretty cold, I might throw a jacket and hike in that for a while and then take it off as I go. But yeah, with these three pieces, that's sort of like the base system. For probably 90% of stuff on top of that, I throw a mid-weight synthetic jacket. This is a Patagonia DOS Light. That's been abused quite a bit, but it's probably my favorite mid-layer jacket. And then I would throw on above that, if it's even colder, a belay style down parka. This is a Patagonia Alploft or something. It's kind of like a grade 7, but a little bit worse. But it works.
I'd say a lot worse, but a lot cheaper too. Probably
Yeah.
half the amount of half the cost.
Yeah. And then the last sort of upper layer you'd have is like I'm climbing in the snow. It's cold shell, which is like a full like 3-layer shell. I like one that has some internal pockets for putting gloves in, and this one actually doesn't have one, but one that has a double zipper is kind of nice. So that's what I use for probably 90% of my upper layers. And like Vitaly said, occasionally you might be climbing things where you're just cold all the time. And in that case, I might switch the system up a little bit. And instead of wearing a sun hoodie as the base layer, I might throw on this sort of like merino wool, like thicker base layer, and even like a thin, like synthetic layer above that with all this other stuff, because I'm going to be cold all the time and I don't need to protect from the sun. But all the layers above that would be the same. So really this sort of system, this is like a discontinued Merino Air hoodie. This is some or what is it? Nano Air Light pullover or something.
Something like that.
Something like that is what I would wear if I'm like, no, I'm going to be cold all day. So like ice climbing in Canada, I like go for this instead of the sun hoodie layer. And then the last sort of niche thing that I pretty much always have on me that you may or may not want to have is just a really light windbreaker. This is also good for layering on the approaches where it's just you need to cut a little bit of wind, but you don't want to pull anything out of your pack. And so I'll just have this stuffed in its pocket, clipped to my backpack strap, so I can just take it off and put it on real quick without having to dig through my backpack. So that is my preferred upper layers. Yeah. Any other questions?
Do you feel like there is a lot of difference between how you pack when you travel to Patagonia versus if you're traveling to the Garhwal and Himalayas or to Denali?
Yeah, so that's a good question about if there's any differences in how I pack on like high altitude expedition versus Patagonia versus Denali, etc. I would say in general, no. That's the benefit of like layering systems, is that you have all these tools and they work really well together. The only thing, honestly, it's basically the same. The only thing I would maybe do different is in a place like Patagonia is like I'm where I don't expect to be climbing in any sort of medium bad weather. It's either like really good or super bad. I would probably take this full weight shell and replace it with like a really lightweight shell. And that's more or less the only thing I would change.
But you still pack the shell to on the trip itself. It's just you.
Sometimes no.
But if you're gonna be climbing a mixed route on Serratoria or something, you'd probably want a full shell.
Yes, correct. That's a good distinction. If I'm going to be doing actual like boots and tools climbing, I'm probably going to take a full weight shell because you're going to get spin drifted on, etc. If it's like alpine rock climbing where some weather might come in, I'm going to opt for a very lightweight shell or maybe even just a Houdini, depending on how good the forecast is.
Oh, awesome. That's a great rundown.
Sweet. All right, well, that's my layering system, and now we'll see what Vitaly's preferred upper layering system is, and if there's anything different.
As Christian said, my first layer in my system is probably sunscreen. I try to use a lot of sunscreen, even though it doesn't look like it, because on the last trip, my nose got totally burnt, but that's mostly due to the approach and not taking care of myself on the approach. I usually bring a hat and a buff onto the expedition, but I use them mostly in Basecamp only. I typically love to climb in thin sun hoodies as my base layer, and they come with hoods, and my following mid layer comes with a hood. So instead of bringing the hat, I try to just utilize my hoods that are in my layers, which makes it really hard to hear my friends when they're trying to talk to me. I really love this layer by Black Diamond a lot because it has an internal pocket here, and it allows me to keep my sunscreen or maybe a couple snacks or my phone close to me, and or to keep a battery pack warm next to my body. But my base layer, no matter what, if it's a cold approach or a hot climb, will be some kind of a thin base layer that dries fast. So when we climb cold north faces, or if I'm ice climbing somewhere in Canada like Christian, I do use a thicker base layer.
And what is the name of that fabric? Just one more time.
Alpha Direct, Polartec Alpha Direct. And I do, just like Christian, I do like to utilize vests, especially if it's a warm approach. And by warm approach, I mean if it's really cold at night and I get too hot hiking in a shell or an insulated jacket, I like to put on a vest over my base layer to keep my upper body warmer, especially if it's windy. And just like the question that I posed to Christian earlier, I pack the same things no matter if I'm going on a Denali trip to Patagonia or to Himalayan mountains. What I do is I bring all the things that I want to have there, and then based on the weather and the objective, I pick the layers. So, for example, on our last acclimation trip, where we got to about 19,600 feet, I wore this sun hoodie base layer. I brought this Patagonia mid layer with a hood, and one of the things I wanted to add is basically every layer that I have has a hood. I like hoods because it can, you can use it to protect yourself from the wind, from the sun, from the cold. And I chose to bring this vest, and I brought 2 shell jackets on this trip. One is by Black Diamond, their ice climbing jacket from this year, and another from a brand called True Dark, which sent me their jacket and pants for free, which is really nice. I loved all the features here. Some of the features that I love in a shell jacket are full pit zips and pockets, because I want to keep my snacks close to me, and I want to open up the pit zips if I'm warm on the approach. And both of these jackets have these features. And I brought a warmer mid-layer jacket and this old Mountain Hardwear Phantom down jacket, which I really like. It's probably a little less warm. Yeah, it's definitely less warm than the Patagonia Grade 7 jacket, but slightly warmer than the Alploft. And this is basically the system that I use. Do you have any questions, Christian?
Are there ever situations where like the order in which you layer things changes?
Yeah, I would say so. It basically changes based on the forecast, and if I'm in the sun for the approach versus the shade. Because if I'm planning to hike through the dark in a lot of cold, I typically try to start in like a medium warm system. I'm not a fan of start cold approach unless there is a real good reason. If we are unable to, stop and take off a layer, which almost never happens, then I will just keep myself comfortable and keep that sort of a medium warmth type of level from the start, so that I don't get overly cold. When you get overly cold, you lose a lot more calories. You basically increase your metabolic demand on the body. So I try to keep myself comfortable, and by that, I will likely start in a sun hoodie, a vest, and a shell jacket. And then I'll put my backpack on. I'll keep my down jacket in the upper part of the backpack, so that when we stop and put our crampons on, or like rope up, then I can throw that over myself and keep myself warm. Or when you get, too hot walking in the heavier layers from Basecamp, then like 30 minutes later, I can just stop and take the shell off, maybe take the vest off, and just strap them to the top of my backpack. But have all the layers that are most necessary easily accessible. Like snacks and layers is what I really like to keep accessible on the top of my pack. Because even though layers for expeditions can look very similar from a trip to Patagonia or Canada or the Garhwal Himalayas or Nepal, there is a lot of nuance to how you gonna pack for a particular objective. Because aside from the weather forecast, there is an individual nuance that comes into play here, because different people run different warmth on the approach and on the climb, and different objectives might require a different layering system, just because if you are trying to climb a south-facing buttress that is highly technical, and you will be in the sun a lot, and the upper part of the route you can move on easier terrain, you might pack very differently than if you are climbing the north face with very little sun and technical terrain to cover, because you will be more stationary and you will be colder. And another thing that plays a role in the nuance from different objectives and different days is how well fed you are. Because if you aren't well fed and you are likely to be in calorie restriction up on the wall, you will likely run a little cooler and your circulation is not going to be as good as it could be otherwise.
Yeah, so as you can see, Vitaly, I didn't even talk about this beforehand, but our systems are almost identical. I do the same thing, keeping the big puffy at the top of the pack and the snacks, and the way we layer is almost the exact same. So it's a very versatile system, would recommend. Yeah, and like Vitaly said, there's a bunch of different brands that make similar things. Choose whatever is in your budget you can get a good deal on. This is just what I have, and I haven't bought anything since, so.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and in our next video, we'll go through our bottom layers and kind of the same system of what we choose and why. And then we'll also do a video on some boots and some gloves.
Yeah.
And then that should...
And approach shoes.
And approach shoes. And that should round
and
out...
crampons.
Yeah.
And backpacks.
Yeah. We got a whole series covered. So we'll round it out for you guys and hopefully be able to share some good info so you can make decisions about what you need. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for watching. Bye.